Okay, today we're going to look at the issues between Israel and Palestine. So first, looking at the origin of the Israeli-Palestinian issue. So as you know, in the Middle East there's a place called Palestine, and this contains the holy city of Jerusalem, which is important for both Christians, Jews, and Muslims. And there's been competition to control this land for centuries. Now, even though Palestine has been part of the Ottoman Empire in recent history, in 1917, Palestinians saw many Jews start to move to Palestine. Do you know why? Exactly, as part of the Balfour Declaration. Well, what's the Balfour Declaration? The Balfour Declaration was a British program to support what is called Zionism. Zionism is a national movement for Jews to find a national home in their ancestral homeland of Palestine. You may be asking, why is England giving away land in another country? Well, a lot of historians believe that England is looking for help in World War I from the United States in particular. And so by doing something really nice for the Jews, the British were hoping that Jews living in the United States would pressure the U.S. government to join the war and support the British. So beginning in 1917, more and more Jews will move to Palestine. Palestinians sold them land, in some cases at 3 times the fair value, but more and more Jews continued to buy the land and settle. In the build-up to World War II, as a result of World War II, and thus the Holocaust, even more Jews will move to Palestine after the conflict is over. And so eventually the United Nations steps in to try to broker a deal between the Jews who live in Palestine and the Palestinian Muslims. And that is a 2-state solution, meaning the Jews get one country and the Palestinian Muslims get another country. You can see right here in green what would be the Jewish area, and then in red what would be the Arab or Muslim area. Now, the Jews loved this idea because they would get a national home. The Palestinians, on the other hand, rejected it because they felt like they were losing their land. Within the next year, the Jewish leaders of Palestine will create their own independent state called Israel. Immediately, Israel's Arab neighbors will team together and invade because they don't believe that this new country, Israel, is legitimate. Officially, the 1948 war will be between Israel and the Arab League. As you can see up here, the Arab League is huge. Jordan, Egypt, Syria, Iraq, Lebanon, plus other countries helping out. Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, Yemen, and Sudan. And guess who wins? That's right, Israel. Can you think of an advantage that Israel had over the Arab League in this war? Okay, picture time. So on the left, right here, you're looking at the United Nations plan to divide Palestine and Israel into 2 states. Remember, the Palestinians rejected this because they were losing land. In the middle, right here, this is what the country looks like just after the war in 1948. Look how much more land Israel has after winning the war than they had if they had accepted the 2-state deal. Flip it around. Look how much more land the Arabs would have had if they accepted the UN solution on the left versus what they have here in the middle. One of the things that led to Israel winning is that their Arab enemies were also rivals themselves. So there's a lot of bickering and arguing over who has the most power and who's the dominant Arab state. The 2 most powerful Arab League members were Egypt and Syria. So in 1958, the 2 countries ally to create the United Arab Republic, hoping to create a single Arab state in the Middle East. However, other countries like Iraq, Jordan, and Saudi Arabia never joined because they thought that these other 2 countries just wanted their oil, which is probably true. So you can see the United Arab Republic right here and right here, with Israel being right here. If you're Israel, you can't feel real good with this new development. You're practically surrounded. Now, Egypt's president is Gamal Abdul Nasser, and he's a military man, he's a colonel, and he is the one who will take the fight to Israel. Now, over time, predictably, this United Arab Republic fizzled before they really had any great results. However, in looking at this, Egypt is still a very dominant opponent for Israel. And one of the things that Egypt did a lot, you can see this if you look at the map, is that they often messed with trade coming up the Red Sea to go into the Israeli port called the Gulf of Aqaba. And so by doing this and really threatening to cut off Israel from important trade, Israel launched a famous 1967 surprise attack, not only defeating Egypt, but also expanding into Syria, and they tripled the size of their country in 6 days. This is called the 6-Day War. Now you can see right here what I was talking about, okay? The Gulf of Aqaba is right here, right along the Sinai Peninsula, and then with Saudi Arabia on the other side. But if you look in blue, this is all area that Israel will gain in just 6 days of fighting. Now, wanting revenge, the Egyptians plotted a retaliation, which they did in 1973 on the Jewish Day of Atonement called Yom Kippur. And you can see the fighting is basically in two areas once again, against Egypt right here, and then against Syria right here. Even though this is a surprise attack, the Israelis didn't really lose that much land. So this really isn't that effective of a retaliation by Egypt and Syria. So this is what I just said. The first real breakthrough between Israel and Egypt happened in 1978 when President Jimmy Carter from Plains, Georgia, was able to get the Egyptian president, a guy called Anwar Sadat, the old vice president of President Nasser, who's now dead, and the Israeli prime minister called Menachem Begin, and they met in the United States at the presidential retreat called Camp David. You got to understand that just years earlier, these two opponents were launching surprise military attacks against each other. So getting these two people in the same place to talk is a huge breakthrough for the United States and Jimmy Carter. Now, things didn't go very well. For 13 days, both sides argued, they threatened to leave, and Carter had been working for more than a year to try to broker some type of peace deal. Now, Israel was willing to give Egypt the Sinai Peninsula back, but what they wanted was something that Egypt wasn't prepared to do, which was to recognize Israel as a legitimate country. So after 13 days of negotiations and being stressed out, intense meetings, the two sides were able to form an agreement. You can see Anwar Sadat on the left and Menachem Begin on the right, and then Jimmy Carter, all smiles, in the middle in this unique handshake. Begin and Sadat would share the Nobel Peace Prize for their work. While this was a global breakthrough, people in Egypt weren't very happy with their leader. They felt like their leader really sold them out. And so Anwar Sadat on the left will be assassinated by his own people when he gets home. So it is a sad ending to a very important breakthrough and story of tolerance. Okay, with the Camp David agreement in place, the challenge really will change for Israel because new opponents will rise. Now, if you go back and look at the map, there are two areas within Israel where Palestinians live. One's called the West Bank, which is around Jerusalem. The other is called the Gaza Strip, which is near the Sinai Peninsula. Now, this is a map from a Palestinian website, and you can tell it because you can see it says Palestinian loss of land from 1946 to 2000. So the green is where the Palestinians used to live, and then as you can see, it's been shrinking every year. Okay, so what we're looking at here, if you look at the 2000 map, are the West Bank right here and then the Gaza Strip right there. Here's a picture of Yasser Arafat. Now, from the Palestinian standpoint, they live in two areas within Israel, and they feel like the Israelis are trying to push them out by sending in settlers in order to eventually have all the Palestinians leave what was once Palestine and have only Israelis left. Now, on the Israeli side, the Israelis accuse Palestinians of masterminding terror attacks like what we saw from the PLO, and so they built a huge wall on the West Bank. And this is what that wall looks like. It is huge. Now, Israel obviously has a reason to be concerned because, as you saw in the map earlier, they are surrounded by potential enemies. And so they create something called the Israeli Force Doctrine, which promises massive retaliation. Basically, if you harm one of our people, we're going to harm 10 of yours. And the Israelis feel like they have to do this, they have to be this aggressive, or they won't be independent anymore. They're sort of like the little kid who feels like they're being bullied, so they have to make a big stand in order to be left alone. So all this is about conflict. Conflict based on a political disagreement, a religious disagreement. So how can we create peace? Ironically, it seems like the best way to do so is a two-state solution. It's ironic because that was the earliest solution provided by the United Nations in 1947. Remember, in 1947, Palestinians rejected this agreement. Do you think they would reject it today? In 1947, Israelis accepted the two-state solution proposal. However, today Israelis are likely to reject it. Why? All right, that's it. Have a good day. Bye-bye.